Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So the London Wall Street elite freaking out. China is the largest exporter, second largest economy, maybe getting close to be the largest in real terms. The U.S. has 10% unemployment, really 20%. Chinese have 10% economic growth, and a lot of that is real. Not all, but a lot. Of course, they've got a long way to go for the 600 million peasants, essentially, the poor people in the interior, the parts of western China. But let's look at a couple of key areas. You want to talk about national power, you're going to talk about nuclear reactors, you're going to talk about fast rail, and you're going to talk about your space program. Let's take these as three crucial indicators for who's viable and who's not. Nuclear reactors. The U.S. has about 100 to 103. They're antiquated, they're old, they're all pre-Carter. China is building 20 modern reactors. They're going to have a high-temperature reactor. I think they're going to have a fast breeder. They're going to have a whole array of things the U.S. can only dream of. China's building 20. India's building 6. The U.S. maybe 1, if you're lucky. The U.S. is lucky to be building 1. China, according to the plans, will pass the United States in nuclear power output. They will go beyond the 100 megawatts or so that the 100 plants, let's call it the 100 plant equivalent, gigawatts, the 100 gigawatts by about 2020 to 2025. So 10 to 15 years from now, China will pass the U.S. in nuclear power output, and their units will all be ultra-modern. They will have the most modern nuclear technology. And the U.S., if they're still going with these antiquated things we have now, the pre-Carter park of reactors, we will have the most antiquated system in the world. So you don't like that? Here's my recommendation. Before World War I, one of the things the British did, this was an arms race. I'm talking about a peace race. But in the arms race between Britain and Germany, the British felt so threatened by the German fleet. Every time the Germans would lay down the keel of a battleship, start building a battleship, Britain would start 2. And the policy was called 2 keels to 1. They lay down 1 keel, we lay down 2. Well, China's building 20 reactors. Instead of building 1, why don't you build 20 of your own? Why don't you build 40? Why don't you build 60? Why don't you build 100, which is what I recommend? 100 nuclear reactors immediately of the most modern type, 4th generation, pebble bed or gas-cooled, I guess, or other types, but get the most modern technology and build an array of that so that you can match it. Again, if it's 20, match it, but better yet, go for 100 because that's what you're going to need because otherwise this existing 100 that we have in the United States is going to be on its last legs. Second point, fast rail. Here it's even worse. China is already way ahead in fast rail. They have maglev, U.S. does not. They have the fastest bullet train in the world. Even Obama had to allude to this in his State of the Union message. This is 1,000 Ks from Canton, Guangzhou to the north, Wenhao, I think. And this one goes at 300 to 350 Ks per hour, and it's a fantastic modern thing. It's better than anything in Japan or Europe, to say nothing of the U.S. The U.S. has maybe 250 miles of fast rail. If you want to call the Acela at 110 miles an hour on century-old rail beds using a modern Swedish technology, well, then the U.S. has 250 miles. The Chinese already have about 1,000 Ks, so call that 600 miles. So they're already ahead by 2 to 1. And here's the program. The Chinese program is $300 billion to build 16,000 miles of fast rail. And I think some maglev is included in there. The U.S. program with Obama is, if you're lucky, 12 or 13 billion to essentially ameliorate these 13 projects in 31 states that LaHood came forward with over the past couple of weeks since the State of the Union. Obama was in Tampa talking about this. But $12 billion for some minor improvements. Essentially, all of this is eaten up by the fact that the the net level of investment is deteriorating. The U.S. rail system is deteriorating. It would take more than $12 billion just to stop the deterioration, to say nothing of moving back to actual improvement. China, $300 billion for 16,000 miles. Now, you don't like that? Well, my program is simple. 50,000 miles of maglev and fast rail, but mainly maglev, will essentially triple what the Chinese are doing. That would make sense for the U.S. That would be a real stimulus. So if you've got people who are beating their breast about the Chinese challenge, right, the Chinese peril, oh, my God, then go for a peace race. Let's have another one. Space. Here it looks very bad for the U.S. indeed, because here there's not even a pretense of doing anything. The Chinese put up their first astronaut, cosmonaut, in 2003. They orbited the moon with a satellite successfully in 2007. The Chinese have an ambitious, well-funded, and robust program of manned space exploration and colonization. They're going to the moon. Where is the U.S. going? Based on Obama's new budget, as announced by the despicable anti-science thug Peter Orszag of the Office of Management and Budget. This is the guy who hates mammograms, hates pap smears. Not surprisingly, he hates the space program. They said that NASA will essentially liquidate, end, terminate its entire manned spaceflight program. There won't even be the Bush-era promise of going back to the moon by 2020. The U.S. is not going. China is going. I think India is going. But the U.S. is going nowhere. So tragic. This allows us to see perhaps the moment when the world will become aware of the scientific technological decadence and backwardness of the U.S. It's when the Chinese have astronauts on the moon and the U.S. has nothing. The U.S. will be caught flat-footed, backward, whining, and so forth. And, of course, this means several $100 billion of investment would be needed anyway. Now, where would you get such money? Well, the Federal Reserve has no problem at all coming up with 0% credit when they want to. For Goldman Sachs, for J.P. Morgan Chase, if you're a derivatives monger, if you're a stock jobber, if you're a financial speculative parasite of any type, you can be a bank, an investment bank, a hedge fund, you can be a brokerage, you can be a credit card company, you can be an insurance company, you can be a money market fund. For all of this, we have 0% credit. But then when it comes to real economic activity, from the very large to the very small, down to the local company, right, the dry cleaner, the restaurant, the auto repair shop, nothing. There's no credit for any of that. So if you want to keep pace with the Chinese and other challenges emerging in the world, you have got to open up that Main Street lending window, in other words, the industrial output window, force that open. This was done at the Federal Reserve, and you've got to force them to do it. You've got to force the Fed to issue 0% long-term credit for projects in the area, say, of a space program, a fast rail program, and the building of nuclear reactors. 0% long-term maturities, 40, 50 years, whatever it takes. Force them to do it. That amounts to nationalizing the Fed in part, and once you've nationalized that part, you want to suppress the other part and stop the 0% lending to the J.P. Morgan and Morgan Stanleys of the world. And you do that, you can keep pace. You can take the Chinese programs and double them or triple them, which is what I've proposed. Back in a minute.